Hi, this is Susan. A few days ago, we had a fascinating and wonderful visit from an old friend, Will Tuttle, and we have had a lot in common with how we've been experiencing this last year. Had a chat about it. And before I share this with you, I just wanted to clarify, because I know that many people really have suffered from this pandemic in the last year, that we're not saying that there aren't some real health issues that people have had and deaths. You may have known someone yourself who's passed away from this, and we're sad about that. That's too bad. What we are saying is that just if you look at it objectively, compared to other things like even the 1968-69 Hong Kong flu, which was hardly noticeable for many of us, many more people died. And in an ordinary year, a lot of people die of the flu, and the overall mortality statistics really aren't that different. In any case, they didn't seem to either of us to really warrant the just a shocking level of shutdown and repression of freedom. Likewise, we wanted to add that we realize that for those in the healthcare professions, this is really a challenging time, and some understand and some maybe don't understand so well how much their profession is really controlled from the top down by forces that are much bigger than their simple, heartfelt, and honest desire to help people. Many doctors have lost their job or had it threatened by questioning this narrative. And if you can't question things with an open mind, you have to ask, do we really have a free society anymore? So Will and I are both people who've been trained in social sciences and humanities, and it's been our job to look at those things, to look at those deeper, more core issues, as well as through the kind of spiritual practices and things we each have engaged in. I also wanted to add that we're going to talk about parallels between what's been happening this last year and the psychology of cults. This is not to imply the negative connotation of cult, that everyone who supports, what's been going on, supports social distancing, is a member of a cult. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is really that there are belief systems, and it's a whole continuum. So on one side you have just kind of a fairly closely held belief system, or tentatively held at least. And you have a more rigid one. It could be a religion, it could be science, it could be beliefs about yourself or other people. And then there's ones that become codified, that are really strongly rigid, and then there's ones that are on what we call cults, that are more just really refuse to look at anything else, and that have a strong psychological coercion about them. So bear that in mind. Really, we should be talking about the psychology of group conformity. Okay, so take a look. Please listen with open mind and open heart, and enjoy. We have a visitor here today, Dr. Will Tuttle, the author of the World Peace Diet. And he's a prominent vegan activist as well as an excellent musician, as you just saw in the introduction. And we have shared some interest during this last kind of crazy year of COVID with what is really going on here. And we both have noticed some parallels with studies that we've done in the past, each of us, on cults. And let's start with Will here talking about it first. What have you noticed?
Well, I think what we see happening here is the repression of the individual and the rollout of what is in many ways, I think, a mass delusional psychosis based on a false medical narrative that's just designed to create a lot of fear in people in order to take away their freedom and take away their economic wherewithal. And I think one of the most powerful aspects of this is the requirement that people wear a mask. This idea of course, social distancing, mask wearing, lockdowns. Lockdown is a term from prison populations. This idea that we are basically terrified of an invisible enemy that is going to attack us, and that it attacks us from other people, from each other. So that my face, in a sense,
it's a brilliant design. If you wanted to separate people, and
right, my
fear.
face is a weapon, right? And, if you really want to make people afraid of each other, destroy social solidarity,
Right.
and destroy really the fabric of society in order to impose a tyrannical regime. This would be exactly the way to do it, through a medical rollout. And I think when we try to bring logic and rationality and real science to the discussion, it goes nowhere for many people because of a cult indoctrination that is done through a ritual. And I think one of the main rituals is the requirement that people wear a mask.
Yeah.
And I've been very interested in masks for decades.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know, essentially, I think the whole idea of spiritual maturity is that we realize that we are not the personality. Personality comes from persona. Persona is the ancient Greek word that means mask.
Right.
Per means through,
Oh, yeah.
sona means sound. You speak
Oh.
through a mask. So what happens is we're born into this world, and then we're indoctrinated into the society, and we all are given, basically, and we create our own mask, our persona, and
Yeah.
we present that to the world. We want to have a good one that we can make good money and get a good,
Yeah.
right, get a good partner
Yeah.
and show it off and so forth. But that's the enemy of real spirituality, which is to discover our true nature, which is the infinite life that was never born and will never die, that is totally at home in an awareness of the infinite interconnectedness of all life.
Yeah.
And so if you want to control people, essentially, and take away their freedom and their economic power, then you put a ritual in place that deletes this awareness of the spiritual power. And you got to remember, spirit, the word spirit means breath. And so when we read in the ancient scriptures over and over again this emphasis on breathing, that like ruach, the word from the Old Testament in the Hebrew, I breathe ruach, the breath of life, into you, into human beings and into animals, the divine. So what the mask does, the essential thing the mask does, is it stops the breathing. It stops the breath. It cuts our relationship with spirit, which is breath, and it's really through breath. I've been meditating for 50 years, and a lot of breath awareness comes from meditation and pranayama yoga, for example. When we connect with our breathing, we're connecting with the divine power that connects us with everything and with each other. And when you put something over people's nose and over their mouth, that's a face diaper type of thing that stops their individual expressiveness. We don't know if they're smiling or not. They can't speak. They're muzzled. Their
Yes.
connection with their breath is
It feels
broken.
like somebody just kind of did this to you, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's like it gives me it's just horrifying to see people walking around in masks. They lose their individuality. They lose their connection with the spirit. And the fact that we would be willing to
do
wear
it,
a mask.
That's what's really shocking to me, isn't it? Who would have known it exactly a year ago when this stuff began? This is mid-March in 2021. Who would have guessed?
No, I know. I
would
thought
come to this
I never
so far.
thought people would go along with something that is so anti-science. I mean,
Anti-life.
there's never been any studies that show that this is effective. The studies that have been done show it's the opposite of that. I mean, there's four main ways.
Well, actually, I want to interject
okay.
something. Recently, the CDC came out with a study, supposedly. There's the biggest one, the best and the biggest and multi-million-dollar study. And they said, that, and this is what they put out to the media, which is basically controlled by Big Pharma and Gates Company and all that. So that masks are indeed effective at reducing cases and reducing deaths. So, but you dig into it. You find this on thehighwire.com. You dig into the study, several pages in there. It's only like 0.5%.
Right.
It's like
0.5%.
So we're going to destroy our culture, our connection over that.
And actually, in that study, they say they may be effective.
Yeah.
They may be effective, is
Okay.
what they actually say. So the thing is, we know just intuitively there's four ways that we human beings expel toxins, which is the essential activity, right? We have urine, we have feces, we have our skin, perspiration, and we have breath. We breathe out. This is how we keep ourselves clean and how we stay healthy. If you start blocking that, people are breathing in their own toxins, recycling all kinds of things that should be expelled.
Not to mention the particles from the mask itself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Toxic chemicals from the mask itself, plus reducing oxygen and increasing carbon dioxide levels, and there's been a whole range of physical problems that are coming from this and psychological problems that are coming from this, and it's been going on for a year and we still see this happening. And so my appeal, I think, really to the world is that we just connect with our breathing and connect with what it is to be a human being, and realize that we are being played, that we are being manipulated and dominated and exploited. And the other appeal I would have really is that we look at our treatment of animals and nature, because I think a lot of this comes out of the fundamental shame that we feel for heartlessly exploiting billions of animals unnecessarily, doing to them what we would not want to have done to us, taking away their breath, taking away their life. And I think because of that, we've sown these seeds.
It's karmic.
Yeah, of being. We are the force that causes these cows and pigs and chickens to be killed. They're being terrified because of us. They can't see us, right? I just go to the store and I buy a piece of meat or dairy.
You don't, but yeah.
Yeah, right, someone does, right? If I
does.
do that, then I'm the invisible harmer of these animals. And so we're sowing those seeds. So what happens? Like you say, karma, so that comes back. And so now we, as a society, are doing this billions of times. All of us, basically everyone's eating animal foods. So now we are terrified of invisible harmers that are all, we can't see them. In the medieval period, of course, it was invisible spirits, and so we had elaborate religious powers that were the church at that time that would protect us from the evil demons that would cause plagues and so forth. And now, of course, the priesthood is the doctors, the high priest is Fauci. We have this implicit, very deep, I think it's a very deep psychological need to as a herd, in a sense, as people coming together, that we all do the same thing, right? We're indoctrinated
it's like a herd
together,
defense kind of.
right? Into a cult mentality that we all have to engage in this behavior because the authority figures have told us that this is what we have to do. This is the priesthood, and they have their mumbo jumbo, their big words that we don't know, we don't understand.
Can I add something here too? I did in my studies of social psychology. I took some seminars on cult psychology, did some reading on that, and it's interesting. You might think of something like the Moonies, or some religious cult, but the psychology of it's the same, and what it depends upon initially is a person who's going through some kind of transition, who's afraid, who's under stress and vulnerable. And so all this indoctrination that we've gotten 24/7 through the media about how terrible this disease is when it really isn't, has gotten people into this state of vulnerability and fear. So the second step is then you promise people salvation. Okay, if only you wear a mask, you social distance, you lock down your business, you make these sacrifices, and you take the vaccine for the greater good, then you will be okay. And there's always a strong, charismatic leader. And we have our Fauci's and our Gates and so on. And of course, they always have something, saying that you have to do something positive, make you feel good, we're in it together. And then they'll have some kind of initiation ritual, such as shaving your head or wearing a mask in this case. And while it may seem that this is for some other purpose, it really is to suppress your individuality, humble you, and to create group identification so you can distinguish yourself from others. This happens in any kind of new initiation into a social group, whether it's the military or becoming a nurse and wearing a uniform, that kind of thing. Purpose really is to help you solidify your identity with the group and remove your individuality. Don't forget 24/7 indoctrination to repeat the ideology again and again on your TV. And if you are to dare to question the doctrine, that is like consorting with the demons, consorting with the devil. So people who question, all of this narrative, the dissenters, even people that are really expertise in their field, are seen as being bad, being wrong, and just like, don't listen to them, censor them.
They have to be censored.
They have to be censored, and that's exactly what happens in a cult. The narrative can't be questioned if you can't even hear the other side of the story. So it's very hard to get people out of cults, but it can be done. So based on what we know from cult psychology, the first thing really is to remove yourself or another from the constant influence of the cult. So that might mean like turn off the TV, basically. Point out to yourself, to another, the collateral damage, all the suicides, the health problems, fact that it's destroying people's economies and businesses and livelihoods and cultural events and everything we value in life, really. Help them question the medical doctrine, the narrative that's being presented. And there's so many sources, if you look around, that contradict what they're saying officially. And help a person or yourself reintegrate into positive things in life, recovery groups, do fun stuff, go for a hike, get together with people. Support spiritual self-reliance, okay, not based upon egoic things, but just upon a real connection with your heart. And finally, I think it helps to remember that everything that's not really true tends to self-destruct over time. So I think all this is going to come out. It is a matter of time.
Yeah.
And in just this discussion, we need to bring awareness to it, right?
It's really bringing awareness to this and understanding what's happening and realizing that essentially cults thrive on anti-rational behavior.
Yes.
And this whole thing is completely anti-rational. We're not under attack by these viruses. What we're under attack by is fear. And so
and our own psychology, our own fear of deviating from the herd, of being condemned, of being left behind. I mean,
being other.
Being other.
Right.
Well, you think about that. Really, for much of human history, was really dangerous. If you were exiled from your tribe,
right,
you're dead.
We want to conform, and so I think for us, both of us being vegans, we've learned to not depend on conforming to society. I think that makes it easier, but still, the powers that make us want to conform are very strong. So.
Right. So I think for probably each of us, and for people that we know that are on the same page, that having some kind of a spiritual anchor, in your heart, in your understanding, and you're having maybe spent some years looking at how the mind works and being able to step back from thought, being able to step back from the mind, not identify with one's role or with one's beliefs, is really helpful.
Absolutely. I think a spiritual practice is the foundation of everything. To actually be able to let go of the identification with my own thoughts and be aware and witness thoughts as they arise and witness feelings as they arise.
Just be awareness itself, and then you can learn from these things.
Yeah, and spiritual teachers, ultimately we are our own ultimate spiritual teacher, and I think to take time every day to check in and understand that what we are essentially is an infinite life force and power, and that our health really comes from that. Our health comes from connecting with the source of our life, that we have an amazing immune system, and to just think of ways to and act in ways, eating healthy food, exercising, and having healthy relationships. I mean, these are the things that create health, not wearing masks, destroying our connection with our society. I mean, this is not the way to make health. No. And I think going forward, we can grow tremendously out of this whole thing. That's right.
What's your feeling about where we're heading going forward? Do you think we can get out of this mess as a species? And I mean, it's people sort of saying both ways, and I'm inclined to think this is really our opportunity, as collectively, to shake ourselves loose.
Probably. People say that the only way change really happens is when people hit bottom, and then they actually say, "All right." And I think we're being pushed in many ways to a point of collapse. In many ways, we see this whole thing is an attack on the fabric of our psyches and of our society. Relationships are collapsing, businesses are collapsing, suicides are escalating, drug addiction and alcoholism, all these things are escalating. So people are really becoming more desperate than ever to understand the truth, the deeper truths of being. So the liberation of humanity is possible, and it is actually, I think, inevitable ultimately, but it really requires us to liberate animals and liberate nature. Liberate those beings that we are dominating. Let ecosystems thrive.
Do unto others as we would have done unto us.
That's it. It's the golden rule.
It is. It's the bottom line of all religion.
As you sow,
really.
So shall you reap. It's the same thing. So.
Yeah. What do you think, little guy?
The little bird is agreeing.
Yeah. So, thank you. Thanks for sharing. It's really good to have the fellowship of others that are on the same page And yet, at some level, that has to be sort of optional because, like as Will was saying, I think you have to be sufficient unto yourself from the Great Spirit, really, and which connects us all.
Right. Even if
Yeah.
everyone disagrees, we know in our heart what's true, and we have to follow that.
Yeah. And it feels good to do so, and it does feel good to connect with others. And we just want to encourage you, if you've been on the fence about this, to take some chances and to step out a little bit, or a lot, and follow your joy, follow your heart, because I think we're all being called in this time to give our greatest talents and gifts and insights to share with others who are waking up to this agenda and who also see how we can move beyond it to the world we would all like to see.
Beautiful.
Thanks for watching.